This manga chapter was so wildly hated by the One Punch Man fanbase that it was straight up redrawn and rewritten after it had already released. It came during one of, if not the most hyped battles in all of One Punch Man, and left tons of people speechless when it was released. Speechless, but not typeless, I guess, because like I said, the discourse online was so crazy that it led to an emergency change of the manga. One Murata came and swooped in and changed the entire chapter in a bunch of major ways and completely changed the direction of the entire arc. This, of course, is the chapter titled Hateful Fist That Wrongs the Gods, or something similar depending on which translation you read. Well, today I'll be going over both versions that were released and try to explain why people got so damn upset with the first version, along with answering the mystery of why one went with this original version in the first place and how it would have changed the entire story if he had kept it. The original version of this chapter goes like this. The first stage of Saitama's battle with Garo reaches its end after it's made abundantly clear that no matter what Garo tries, he can't make a single scratch on Saitama. Along the way, he tried everything, from dishing out attacks that target Saitama's internal organs, assuming that they weren't as invulnerable as his outer body, spoilers, they are, and even shooting him into the ground so hard that the impact bulged the other side of the planet. Truly an epic beginning to that fight. I don't think anybody has any complaints about that. All of these attempts obviously had zero impact on Saitama, and if anything, showcased some deep-rooted hero instincts within Garo, since most of his attacks inadvertently led to tons of people being saved all around the world. He helped a bunch of people that were trapped in this underground bunker, he stopped a ton of people from being straight up annihilated by an active volcano, and also helped a bunch of people on the other side of the planet that were about to be taken out by a waterfall. After getting straight up worked by some more of Saitama's punches, Garo starts to realize that no matter what he tries, it doesn't seem like there's any way that he can scrap out a victory like he has in every other fight he's been in so far. For the first time, we see a Garo that truly starts questioning if he ever had what it took to accomplish his dream of becoming the absolute evil, and eventually realizes that deep down, he'd always felt like he would fail. He comes to the realization that if he couldn't fulfill his dream, he at least wants to be put down as a monster by the guy who ruined everything for him. Pretty metal, right? He rushes in for one final blow on Saitama and demands that Saitama takes him out, but of course Saitama refuses. He notices Garo's deep resentment for heroes and suggests that they sit down and talk things out instead of carrying on this pointless fight. This is when we get one of the most infamous panels in all of One Punch Man history, where we get this shot of Saitama and Garo sitting across from each other at a table inside this rundown shack, ending the chapter right there and then. Now, let me just say right now, in my opinion, when I first saw this panel in the original release of the manga, I thought it was downright adorable. I mean, just look at how Garo's politely sitting down, looking all sad and ready to have this little therapy session with Saitama, all while having this crazy large monster body. I straight up loved it. The problem is though, most people weren't looking for adorable midway through one of the most anticipated fights of the entire series. They wanted more punching, more explosions, and more rage-induced transformations from Garo. Nothing else. And I can understand that. I mean, people have been waiting for this fight for years at that point. Most people argued that we didn't wait all of these years for the manga version of this fight just to get like a Talk No Jutsu session out of nowhere. And these people also insisted that this straight up ruined the pacing of the entire arc. It's not confirmed that all the backlash caused One and Murata to rewrite and redraw the entire chapter, but you could definitely make the argument for it, seeing as how the Talk No Jutsu session was completely removed from the re-release of the same chapter. In this new updated version, the first half of the chapter stays exactly the same, where Garo still completely gets sock-and-bopped by Saitama, and Garo still realizes that nothing he's done so far had any effect on Saitama whatsoever. However, the changes begin with Garo seeing Saitama as the embodiment of unfairness and even imagined him alongside the bullies that tormented him when he was a kid. This changes the context of why Garo gets up and continues fighting Saitama at this point, even though visually it's a mirror image of the original version. Before, Garo had admitted defeat and decided to go out as a monster, while in this new version, Garo refuses to admit defeat to Saitama. This is where things go in a completely different direction and leads to some massive surprises. Instead of blocking the blow and suggesting that they talk things out, Saitama just punches Garo so hard that he goes flying and even breaks out of his monster shell. As he's flying from the impact of the punch, this is when he starts to realize that his dream is about to be smothered out by Saitama, and at that moment, an ominous voice says, "I can hear you." This is followed by a series of spiraling clouds forming in the sky as lightning jolts out of each one. Then out of nowhere, two massive legs stomp down onto the earth with massive massive force. We also see that these legs are projecting in a different dimension or something, because the civilians and heroes nearby only see the massive storm clouds, but not the towering legs. This also includes Saitama. We then see this ominous figure, presumed to be God, talk to Garo directly as it says, "Garo, your deepest wish is on the verge of falling apart at the hands of a single hero." And in very Garo fashion, he responds with, "Shut your mouth, you want to get killed?" Well, God ignores this and says, "There is only one fist that can counter the fist that is turned against God. What do you think that is?" Garo responds by saying, "What are you trying to say? Who the hell are you, asshole? Show your face." The ominous voice chuckles and says, "And here I am trying to help you out." This is when God seemingly takes the form of Bang, Garo's former master. He continues on to say, "There is no master who would just sit back and watch as their student gets beaten." He then reaches out a hand to Garo, likely to offer him some of his power like he has to many others. After this, we cut back to Saitama on the ground looking up at the sky. He notices that something's coming, and right on cue, Garo lands right in front of him. This is when we get one of the most shocking moments in the entire manga, as Saitama notices that Garo made another costume change, referring to his previous monster transformations, but this one is much different, and something that nobody had seen before, not even webcomic readers. This was a brand new reveal in the story. As the focus moves back to Garo, we see that his body is now enveloped completely in this outer space landscape, with stars and galaxies being projected all over him. Saitama squints his eyes in disbelief at what he's seeing, but this is no illusion. Garo has now become Awakened Garo Cosmic Fear Mode. From then on, the rest is history, with one of the most insane fights you'll ever see in a manga. Super epic moment. I still get excited rereading that chapter, no matter how many times I go back to it. This new version was undoubtedly praised by the whole fanbase, and injected the hype and excitement back into the fight that many people thought was lost in the original version. I've always wondered though, what was One thinking with this original version, and what direction was he originally planning on going with this fight? Because the difference in how each version ended could not be more different. One ends adorably, the other one ends like the whole world is about to end. I, for one, never really saw a problem with the original version, and the people that were all up in arms about the entire fight potentially ending this way weren't really looking at the bigger picture, in my opinion. There is absolutely no way that One was planning on ending the fight this way, and it was likely more of an intermission if anything. Up until the infamous Talk No Jutsu session that never happened, we had gotten non-stop action between Saitama and Garo. I could definitely see why One would want to take the time at around the halfway point of the fight to further develop Garo as a character by letting him reveal his deepest fears and resentments to Saitama. These feelings are why he's doing all of this to begin with, after all. This could have been a good way for both Saitama and Garo to reach a deeper understanding of each other and both of their reasons for fighting, making the rest of the fight even more meaningful. It's likely that this conversation would have lasted like half a chapter or something, and then we would have gotten the same Cosmic Fear Garo transformation that we got in the second version. All the second version was doing is bringing us all that stuff a lot sooner and cutting out what people called the quote-unquote fluff. On that note, at the time, a lot of people were under the misunderstanding that all of the God stuff and the Cosmic Fear Garo transformation was all added on the fly or something to kind of appease the readers and revamp the entire fight, and to me that's simply not likely at all. Everything we got in the updated version was likely always going to happen, but just after the sit-down therapy session. I imagine that at the end of their conversation, Garo would get enraged at the idea that Saitama is simply a hero for fun or something, and go on the offensive once again, not accepting that someone with such a lame purpose for fighting could end his much more important dream of becoming the absolute evil. Kind of following the vibe of the webcomic, honestly. Saitama would punch him like he did in the new version, and everything else would follow as it did. Under most circumstances, this would have been a completely acceptable route for One to go, and I don't think anyone would have complained. The problem is that One had two major things going against this first version. For starters, One Punch Man is a bi-weekly release versus the usual weekly release schedule a lot of other battle manga follow. This extra week in between each chapter makes it to where the anticipation and the excitement for the next one is way higher than it would be if it had a weekly release schedule, and the hype was exponentially increased during this time in particular because of where we were at in the story. For readers to wait 2 weeks for the next entry of this epic fight, only to be met with a potential therapy chapter immediately after that, it makes sense why it bothered a lot of people. Along with this, webcomic readers were continuously comparing how the Monster Association arc was going in the manga with how it originally went down in the webcomic, many of which were already pounding their fists on the table declaring that the webcomic version was way better, long before this controversial chapter. This only made it to where that vocal minority got even louder louder by now having this mostly disliked chapter to point to. And this is just a universal problem with like any One Punch Man chapter. The webcomic elitists always point out how the webcomic was way better for this reason or another. Look, if you enjoy the webcomic more than the manga, that's totally fine. That's totally your right. I don't want to poo-poo on your opinion. Enjoy One Punch Man how you want, but just let other people enjoy the manga if they prefer that. Everybody can have their cake and eat it too. But anyway, I for one am big on a writer's integrity to stand by their work, no matter how disliked it is by the fan base. That's just always been a belief of mine and it doesn't change here. I mean, just look at what happened with Attack on Titan. Without getting into any spoilers, the reception of the original ending of the manga was so freaking negative that the creator himself added to the ending a little later, and when that ending was received poorly, Isayama went as far as to apologize to the entire community for not giving everyone an ending that they loved. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's admirable that these mangakas care so much about giving the readers the best experience possible. It's honestly something that's pretty absent in Western media if you ask me, but the idea of changing or altering your vision because some people are crying about it, I don't know, it just always rubbed me the wrong way, you know? Also, I'm pretty sure if many of the people that disliked the original version actually went back and read the whole fight, adding in an imaginary sit down that Saitama and Garo would have had just before he became Cosmic Fear Garo, they'd have way less of a problem with it now knowing the bigger picture that one was trying to paint. Simply being able to read through the entirety of the story in one sitting and digesting it all at once, I think would make it a much more appealing experience for people. Again, no one knows for sure if the poor reception of this chapter was what actually led one to change the direction of the fight. It's possible that one himself didn't like how it turned out, and it was of his own volition that the new version was made. Your guess is as good as mine. One thing I do know for sure is that when the original version first dropped, people were acting like their goddamn houses were burning down or something with the reactions they had. What a time to be a One Punch Man fan it was.